You ever just scroll down to the comments from what you were watching and wonder why everyone is being so hateful? These days, comments aren't only limited for famous internet celebrities. If you're on any social media platform, run a business, or even just keeping to yourself, chances are you've had strangers comment on your actions and opinions before. While some comments are harmless and even uplifting, the not-so-nice ones can really put a damper on your day. In fact, certain platforms have a reputation for breeding an echo chamber of toxic individuals. But what if I told you there's a way you can reply to snap them out of that toxicity instantly? All hail the algorithm, I'm Donna. A common question I often get about how to be a YouTuber is how to handle hate comments. Although the best way I think to handle them is to block and delete the hater, there is one way you can respond that makes them change the way they speak to you pretty fast. Now, I realize that by me divulging this information, it will backfire on me in the future because haters will refer to this video and be like, oh, I see what you're doing. But if it helps you, that's a positive in my book. So to understand how this method will work, we need to understand why the internet is such a negative and hateful place. Although I've been uploading content at a consistent-ish schedule for the past 5 years, my interest in this subject peaked during the pandemic. When more and more people had no choice but to stay at home, I noticed an uptick in a certain behavior on Facebook. Other than the slight increase in usage, I noticed friends and relatives speaking to each other in a rather, distasteful way. Words that they would never have said to each other in person were exchanged in their comment section below. Why? Why are we more likely to excuse our own bad-mannered language towards another when we're behind a screen? An answer to that may lie in an old study by Albert Bandura done in 1975 called Disinhibition of Aggression Through Diffusion of Responsibility and Dehumanization of Victims. What a mouthful. The study sought answers to what makes humans aggressive. Past research in aggression was largely concentrated on what instigates aggression. Bandura wanted to broaden the scope of aggression by explaining how aggressive patterns are developed, what provokes people to behave aggressively, and what regulates their aggressive actions. Bandura hypothesized individuals will become more aggressive when 1. There is a diffusion of responsibility. This phenomena describes an individual's action or inaction when in a large group. 2. When the target of the aggression is dehumanized. This means the victim is painted as less than human. As you can see, the study has synonymous elements with internet users. Responsibility is diffused when one leaves a single comment in the sea of many other comments. Although creators aren't looked down upon like society has on homeless people or illegal immigrants, creators have been given dehumanizing characteristics with the word influencer. They're narcissistic, selfish, out of touch, spoiled, and many more. Although some internet celebrities do fit these descriptions, many don't and are unfortunately thrown into this grouping as well. Additionally, the screen barrier further supplements dehumanization. You're unable to get clarifications for things compared to an in-person convo. You don't get facial cues, body language, and tone. So the experiment to test this hypothesis went something like this. A group of participants were told they were partaking in research that examined the effects of punishment on decision-making. Participants were led into cubicles where they could not see or interact with each other. Each cubicle had an aggression device for delivering shocks in 10 levels of intensity. The participants were assigned to be supervisors that were to administer these shocks to a group of decision-makers they too could not see. If the decision-maker made the wrong choice, participants were to give them a little shock. Now, there weren't actually any decision makers outside their cubicle. The experiment was designed to investigate if diffusion of responsibility and dehumanization would make the participants more aggressive toward the non-existent decision makers. To test this, participants were divided into groups: the individualized responsibility group and the diffused responsibility group. The first group was told they were personally responsible for the level of shocks they administered on each decision maker. The second group was told that the shocks they would administer were automatically averaged with the other participants, a collective decision. Groups would be further divided into how the decision maker was portrayed: humanized, dehumanized, or neutral. After the experimenter gave participants instructions, they would retreat into another room and communicate with the participant via intercom. The experimenter would then speak to them over the intercom and say it was time to begin the experiment, only to be interrupted by their assistant. The microphone of the intercom would accidentally be left on so that the participant could hear their exchange. In the humanized condition, the participant would overhear the experimenter and assistant call the decision makers as perceptive, understanding, and otherwise humanized group. In the dehumanized condition, the participants would overhear the experimenter and assistant call the decision makers an animalistic, rotten bunch. They also added a neutral condition where none of this happened. The results were exactly what you expected. Participants gave higher level shocks when their responsibility was diffused and when the decision makers were dehumanized. Okay, so we know the structure of what can make an individual aggressive, dehumanization and the diffusion of responsibility. We also know that the computer barrier between two people can trigger these two things. So what would happen if we take those two elements away? Theoretically, people would be less aggressive. So let's test it out. Let's answer some hate comments. In this personal experiment, I'll be defining hate comments made by someone as comments that contain criticism but said in an unnecessarily aggressive manner. I'm going to answer them in two ways. In the first way, I will attempt to maintain their perception of a dehumanized version of me. To do that, I will be responding in an aggressive and negative manner. Unfortunately, by answering, I will be removing the diffusion of responsibility element, but hopefully, me confirming their dehumanized perception of me will be enough for this experiment. Here's an example of how I will respond for this condition. The second way I'm going to answer will be humanized while giving the commenter a sense of personal responsibility for their words. Like I previously have stated, by me answering their comment, I'm actively removing the diffusion of responsibility. I see you, and whatever your response is now has consequences because it can be tied directly to you. I'm also going to be additionally humanizing the situation by responding less aggressively, kinder, and considerately. Here's an example of how I will respond for this condition. Even though I expected the results of this experiment, I was still shocked at how much it confirmed Bandura's 1975 study. First, there were many comments that didn't receive responses in both groups. Despite attempting to conclude that the responses from creators scare commenters off, this could also mean they weren't notified of my response. For the individuals that did choose to comment back, though, the difference from both groups is staggering. Here are some answers from the dehumanization and diffusion of responsibility group. You bragging about you predicting some big YouTuber actually canceling himself makes it kind of trash, NGL. Imagine building a career over others ruining their own. What a sad you are. Found the crybaby in the comments. Didn't expect anything different from that. Go build a career based on others losing their own. Sad. You also bollocked his fans in that video in a cowardly way, so to now call the psychic is a bit much. You walked eggshells all over the topic for fear of the stands. Nick, you look annoying. Really professional. Dude, how are you gonna answer like that when your first comment was this? Also, you clearly did not watch the video. And Nick is the type of guy to walk up to a girl, get rejected, and then calls her ugly. Now we'll move on to the humanized and personal responsibility group. Watch how quickly people change their tones when I answer their questions this time. Donna, delete this shit. Why, Legoshi? I feel like it's important to be transparent with your audience, and this is a part of the channel's history. You can actually see that I made a video about his downfall as well. You're right, I apologize. Transparency is much appreciated. You wanted him fall, just for sake to prove you right. I hope it's not. How? Oh, hey, you respond. I actually appreciate that very much. You'll look on newer comments to reply on that's surprising. Don't let me be a stumble block on your way. I know it can be tempting to call people who leave bad comments about you bad people. That's not entirely the case, though. For a period of time, it has been thought that early moral teachings were what regulated our behavior. Yet, many large-scale inhumanities were done by people whose fundamental moral principles went against their actions.
These moral standards do not operate as unwavering regulators of behavior. We have the talent to selectively engage and disengage our standards. And in fact, a person can be exceedingly compassionate and empathetic and cruel at the same time. For example, you have a commandant on a prison camp who is dictating a letter of extreme empathy and compassion to his ailing father, and he glances out the window and he sees an inmate there who he feels he isn't working hard enough, and he whips out his revolver and shoots him. So here, in the same instance, he is remarkably compassionate and empathetic, and at the same time barbarically cruel.
This is called moral disengagement, and humans have an uncanny talent for doing this. Dehumanization and the diffusion of responsibility can bring moral disengagement forward. Not only do both these elements naturally occur between internet users, but certain individuals can use these methods to their advantage. People have dehumanized entire groups to push forward their political agendas, and organizational atrocities have been overlooked because everyone felt they weren't directly responsible for it. On the more positive side, we have incidences where photographers have humanized the horrors of war, leading to society's aversion to it. Although Bandura's work is concerned with mass-scale atrocities, it's easy to see how it can be applied to online interaction. Sometimes aggressive comments aren't personal, and I think this information can help creators or any internet user a lot. They're a result of people being lazy-brained and giving into urges they wouldn't normally do if they were face-to-face with you in person. I want to reiterate that the best way to handle hate comments is to ignore them, because if you are having a bad day, you will be affected by them. But if you want to try this out, it's pretty fun. Like, it's pretty crazy that you have the power to change the way people respond to you. And now you guys know the mechanism behind it. That's the end of the video. I will see you guys next time. Stay psyched.